But thank you very much for sending those. And interestingly enough, the first questions today is for myself. So thank you very much. Are we live on both?
No, go ahead. Keep going.
And the question is, what is my favorite board game, and what wine do I like to pair with? So if you've been following our social media actually this week, and I think it was on Monday night or Tuesday night this past week, Olivia and I have been playing Viticulture. Viticulture is a board game about making wine, funny enough. And I bought this game probably 5 years ago now. It has become one of our favorites. But it's a really interesting game, very simple, but it takes you through all the process, all the 4 seasons of what's happening in the vineyard and the cellar. And you make wine and you sell wine, and eventually you get to win the game with points there. Super cool, very interesting. Love it. And as for the wines, I mean, last week we were drinking the Gap, playing that game, and this time around, I mean, I just like. Anything will go with that. It's just super interesting again. So that was for the little board game and the wine pairing there. Do you play any board game, Phil? And
I absolutely love some board games. With a year-and-a-half-old daughter, I don't get in as many board games as I did at one point in time. And probably also because I love really lengthy board games typically. Kind of stuff that will eat up an entire evening on a single run through or multiple evenings. Tend to be my kind of jam.
Okay, couple questions. One, what wine do you pair with that board game?
The Gap was the one
okay.
that I was drinking. Yeah, it was just really
nice.
good.
And then where'd you get that board game? Where'd you buy it?
I actually found it in online. There's a website I usually go to, no advertising, although we could. But it's called Cool Stuff Inc. If you go and look it up online.
Cool Stuff Inc., huh?
Yeah, it's called Viticulture.
Cool Stuff.
Actually, if you want to put the link down in the comments there. But yeah, tons of board games and super interesting ones. So cool. That was for the questions of the week.
Thank you.
So what are we tasting today, Phil?
All right, so we're kind of tasting a couple of the 17 reserves. We're going to do this in a little different order than we might normally do in the tasting room. We'll actually do the 17 5-box reserve first because we'll bring in Chef Chris after we taste through the 17 46 reserve to kind of talk about a pairing specifically kind of geared for that wine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have pre-poured those wines here as well, just because this is some of the reserves, and it's nice to have them opened up a little bit before getting into the tasting. Go ahead.
Producer Brandon coming in, microphone. Hey, remember also be sure to listen up through this segment because we're going to be doing a gift card giveaway at the end. We're going to ask a question, so listen closely.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to do a little gift card for this upcoming segment talking about the wines, and the question is going to be related to the wines. So get ready for that. Absolutely. Cool. So talking about the reserve wines, let's start at the beginning, really. Those reserve wines were first made with the 2013 vintage here on property. And what was the reason behind it? I know you work with I know you joined in 15, but you worked with the...
So I was around for kind of the final blend tweaks and the bottling of the 13 reserves. And I kind of, was able to talk with Terry and Jen kind of about the program. Right. I think it started kind of in 2 parts. One was, just 13 was a pretty spectacular vintage. Mm-hmm. And so kind of going through and tasting through and blending wines, there was some definite standouts early on, some single barrels and some small lots that were really, really showing and, had an incredible intensity to them. And so, early on, those were kind of marked, and kept in mind while blending everything. And it kind of got to the point where it thought it might be fun to keep these in barrel for an additional period of time. So the kind of birth of reserve program was those barrel selected lots from 2013 that actually ended up spending an additional 10 months in barrel, which created this wonderful cohesive mouthfeel. I mean, the transition from the opening, the moment it hits your palate through the mid palate, kind of gains steam there, and kind of lets off into this wonderful lingering finish. The 13 reserves were spectacular. They definitely captured the power and the beauty of the vintage, and kind of set the tone for the reserve programming. We did that. We bottled those, and we're so pleased with it that it was like, okay, this is something we want to try to tackle each year. There's been a bit of an evolution of it. I mean, whereas the wines were solely barrel selected lots. When I kind of picked up the program in 16, and with these 17s, you started creating special blends with the reserve program in mind. So we kind of took it one step farther, and then we'll play with tweaking those a little bit. We'll blend in. We'll still do a little bit of barrel selection amidst that, but we kind of started incorporating, little different blends and little different things happening for the reserve wines then.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the main difference between the traditional label of the 46 and the 5 blocks, as soon as we put that reserve mention for the wines you mentioned, it's a 10-month extra aging process there. Historically, our traditional label has been about 18 months in the barrel, and so we push those up to 28, 30 months aging in those barrels. Now, originally in 2013, only the 46 had a reserve and a hedge.
Yes.
And then we introduced the 5 blocks reserve. What vintage was the first one for that?
So the first vintage was the 2016.
2016
vintage.
Right?
Yeah, that was 5 blocks has been one of the staff favorite wines on the traditional flight, and so I was very eager to kind of go after a reserve rendition that kind of paid homage to many amazing vintages of the traditional 5 blocks.
Right. And I feel like as we're now entering that reserve style wines, a bit longer aging, barrel selection comes in play a lot into what goes further in the aging process, what we're bottling for the traditional and what we're keeping for the reserves. So let's talk about the 5 blocks a little bit. Let's talk about the blend and talk about the differences in the cellar, because it's really where the difference starts and comes in, right, when it comes to the reserve.
Producer B coming in. Hey, we got a question here. So is there a difference in the barrels that are being used? Are you holding from a neutral aging? Question we have.
So the reserve program barrels, I mean, definitely, we've done some videos in the past that you can find on social media, I believe, still, that kind of talk about the barrel program, because the barrel program is a big component to what we do here. These are going to be wines that see more oak. That said, we've been really striving still for a proper balance in that. Typically, all the barrels we use here in general, not typically, all the barrels we use here in general, very tight grain barrels, very slow extraction of a lot of these oak components and oak tannins, lactones and things like that. It's not like American oak or some Hungarian oak can be really aggressive with the way it releases. Very much so American, somewhat Hungarian. But the tight grain French oak slowly releases these flavor components and these tannins. And so you really get a chance. We go hit through and taste through, kind of consistently, and it gives us the opportunity to really like pull it when we want to pull it. We're minimal movement, and so Terry and Jen really had it mapped out pretty well, I feel like, with the time frames that we go in and time frames that they were moving the wines around. So we've kind of stuck to that. But the slow release of these kinds of lactones, which are going to be your vanilla, your caramel kind of characteristics, your mocha characteristics, and a lot of the flashier kind of baking spices and things like that. We can kind of hone it right to where we want it, and then we can back off the oak a little bit at that point, or still give it the time for it to fully integrate. I think that the challenge with oak sometimes is that it can be very overbearing right up front, or really like kind of slappy at the end of the palate. Our goal is that when you open these wines, that kind of it's distributed throughout the wine, and something that really kind of highlights all of the components that are already there in the wine, not overpowering too much.
Right, and that will come. The longer you leave the wine within the barrel there, first of all, the wine oxidizes a little more than if it was in the bottle. So the aging process is a little faster once you stay in the barrel for a little longer, and so that's where those aromatics come really through, I feel like, and gets to a little more complexity in the wines.
Yeah, and new barrels age. New barrels allow for more oxygen integration than older barrels do. So you have that as well. That's why you typically, heavier wines or heavier lots of wines do better in new oak versus lighter profile wines. So the Grenache in the 46 Reserve sees some newer oak, but that's in the form of a punch in, and even then we mitigate the use of that to kind of still hold on to some of that freshness of the Grenache.
We have a question real quick. So what is the life of a wine barrel? How many years can be used for?
So our cycle here is about the 18 months to 28 months for first time use, based on whether it ends up being in the reserve program or just being in the traditional program. And after that, we kind of call it a once used barrel. And from there, it's kind of, I always make the analogy of if you're making yourself some tea. You pour that hot water in, you steep your tea the first time, you have a large impact of flavor from that tea. And then if you use the same tea again a second time, maybe you only get about 20-30% of that kind of impact that you had from the first go round. So those we'll call once used barrels, and they'll go through the cycle again. And then after that, you might see a very small impartation, but it's typically very, very minimal. We'll call that a neutral barrel. And it might see a third and or fourth round. So get your 18 months. I'm doing my math correctly. That's 18.
Too many months.
A year and a half each time. So 4.5 to 6 years. It'll kind of hang around here. Some barrels, it depends on cooperages. Honestly, some barrels dehydrate really rapidly and fall apart and are a really big pain to work with, and you have to patch. We do have to patch barrels and take care of barrels. It's part of what you end up doing. And so those barrels that really make you do that all the time, you kind of want to kick to the curb a little quicker than the barrels that are really sturdy, really well made. Yeah,
and I feel like this is really what when the decisions from the winemaker in terms of what impact he wants to put into the wines and what wine goes into what barrel, is this once used or neutral, really comes in play. Depending, I know we treat the Grenaches very differently than we do a Syrah or even a Mourvèdre, just putting a bigger impact. So that's when you see on those descriptions, usually 70% new French oak used. When they blend those wines, they will use about 70% of wines that has been sitting in the brand new barrel. So usually you're looking at a bigger impacted wine at least. And talking about those patches that we need to do with those neutral barrels of ones that have been dried out, that's why the turnaround the barrel, that's why everybody kind of try to bottles in the summer or just before harvest, trying to make room in the cellar and have the minimal amount of time where the barrel is empty. Because the longer the barrel is empty, the more you're facing challenges in terms of cleaning or keeping clean the barrels and hydrated as well. So I know this comes, it's just got to plan for it for sure.
Also, Cyril's, you've done your fair share of barrel patching. You know all about it. It's not something, it's hot. We steam the barrels typically while we're doing it because we're cleaning them up at the same time. So it's hot, it's steamy, and not in a very fun kind of way.
Yeah, and then you start filling up those barrels when harvest comes around, and halfway down the barrel, you start to see the pressure from the wine building and leaks coming out. So that's when a quick decision needs to be made, for sure. But those are some of the challenges you face as we go around some barrels. So yeah.
Let's hop into the 5 Blocks Reserve.
Absolutely. So again, we're looking at the 17 vintage, which 16 and 17 for us were the two vintages where Graciano came in play for both of those wines, actually. 17 being the last vintage that we used it. So this is a GSM Grenache, a Syrah, Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blend with a touch of Graciano. Let's talk about the blend a little bit.
This kind of follows to the heart of what the 5 Blocks, we always kind of strive for the 5 Blocks to be, which is a Syrah forward blend, but really heavily backed by a good amount of Mourvèdre. Mourvèdre, to me, it plays wonderfully with Syrah. It plays wonderfully with Grenache. It kind of helps Grenache and Syrah play wonderfully together. It kind of shares components with both of them. And it is a wonderful standalone if you can make enough of it on a good vintage. Typically, it's down there on the acreage for us. We have 2-3 acres of it that we're growing.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to kind of make it the primary component, but it comes through wonderfully on these wines, on the 5 blocks especially. It kind of bolsters the fruit component, gives you a really nice full mouthfeel. Kind of similar. We had the white wines a little while back. The way that you throw a little Roussanne in a white wine, it kind of coats your mouth. You throw some Mourvèdre in the wine, and it kind of pushes that wine all around your palate, and kind of gives you some wonderful mouthfeel to the wine.
Yeah, the Mourvèdre has been the challenge in the vineyard. Talking with, going through the replanting, talking with Terry a little bit, he was mentioning how the Mourvèdre never really got a full heel of it, because we always had to do something with it, pull it, replant it. It was diseased, it was not, it was the wrong varietal. So really the past 10 years, none of those Mourvèdre plants have lasted more than 3 years at a time. So this is something that we've been replanting a lot. Now we replanted those in 18 that we have in the vineyards right now. So those are going to be coming in and opening quite a bit of fruit from it this year for sure. But definitely the Mourvèdre has been difficult to have in quantities.
Yeah, I think the thing tasting that pops out to me right away that's really kind of fun is that despite the fact that it's about 1/3, a little over 1/3 Mourvèdre, which tends to be that big kind of like full fleshed out deal, it's got some great acidity to it. The Syrah on property holds acidity really well. The Grenache is very is known to be racy. Graziano also carries a good amount of acidity. So you've got this really kind of nice juicy smoked berry cobbler kind of flavor going for me on this wine, which I absolutely positively love. And it's already in a spot where you can I would do this as a cocktail wine while you're making dinner, and then kind of whatever you got left you can kind of throw in with dinner as well. Absolutely.
I feel like tasting it, despite the almost 30 months in the barrel there, despite the heavy amount of Syrah and Mourvèdre in there, it's still a super approachable wine. It tastes super good right now. It's not overbearing. It's not, chewing on the wine on the finish, when it dries your gums out. It's nothing like this. It's pretty juicy. It's super, super nice. I really love that.
It's indicative of the vintage too. 17 is a really pretty vintage. And so, I feel like with the traditional lineup on the release, it was already showing great finesse. And what you get with more time in barrel is more of that integration and even more of that cohesiveness and once again, even more finesse. And so this kind of took some of the larger lots and rounded them really nicely. I agree. It's in a wonderful spot right now. It's going to do some really fun things if you want to hold on to it, but you don't need to be shy about popping one now.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super nice. And so that was the second time we did the 5 block reserve. 16 was the first vintage. 17, the second one there. I like both of them. Again, I think you're right. The vintage, the 17 vintage altogether, I think comes out super, super well though. Really like that. Really, really enjoy that. Super cool.
Anything that you would think of to pair with that?
Pairing wise, I like something a little meaty on that for sure. This can hold itself pretty well, so I won't be shy to throw it on something a little spicy maybe. Something like, and talking spices, I'm talking about like a seasoning on a steak, on any kind of meat, like cracked pepper. That's a bit more than just a powdered peppers there that you use. Cracked has a little more spice to it, a little bite as well. And so this can take that on pretty well. So any kind of grill, steak, any sauces. I love Boeuf Bourguignon. For me, it's one of my favorites. It's just very slow cooked beef with a red wine sauce on there. And it's not as much spices in there, but it's very earthy, very nice and meaty. And I think this will go on super, super well.
Perfect.
We should talk about pairing and everything like that. We should talk about, bring maybe Chef Chris in here and talk a little pairing what we did with the 46 Reserve.
Absolutely.
Before we go, though, what kind of questions should we ask our team here? Let's make it easy. This is a gift card giveaway here.
So we'll start easy. We'll work our way up. Maybe.
Okay.
So how about the first vintage that we produced the 5 blocks Reserve? What was the first vintage that we produced the 5 blocks Reserve?
So the first one answering the question right in the comments on Instagram, on Facebook, Chef Brendan will be watching the comment section.
Producer
there.
Brandon, yes, no chef here.
No chef.
No chef.
No cooking. But yeah, absolutely. That'd be cool, though. Cool. So do we want to get the chef in now?
Yeah, bring
Perfect.
chef.
All right.
Come on in, Chef Chris.
Great. Grab your glass, and then I'll leave you my sit,
Okay.
and then you can talk about us.
So thanks for coming and hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So
Myself, yeah.
what's life looking like down at Roots on Railroad?
A lot of development and polishing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, downtown you get to see like the whole vibe of the street or the center of our city here, but it's like been kind of mellow, a little mellow, but yeah, just a lot of refinement. So we getting a lot of forward motion on new things, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when did you guys open up?
We our first opening day was Valentine's Day, and we did a full 30 days of business, and then our town just went, on lock, stay-at-home shelter kind of thing. So, yeah.
Which is pretty unfortunate. I worked service industry in the area for a long time, so I know that all of us in the service industry veterans and other service industry current members were all excited to see you open that up down there.
Yeah.
So what does it look like now? How can people order from you?
It's been, in a way, it's been a kind of a blessing, So we had our first 30 days of business. It was really, it's triumphant almost. And we were really looking forward to ZinFest weekend, of course, as everybody was in our community. So it was a complete devastation to not have participated in that this year. What that has done for us, for the town and the community, we've been able to connect and build relationships with the town and develop a reliability for a lot of new people maybe we would have not had a chance to meet. We're providing services as far as free meals for people in need, different things that they're able to take advantage of us that we normally wouldn't do, such as large items, really nice certified Angus beef packages that we're selling out, and those are going really well for us. And organic produce we're doing pickup, meal prep, daily dinners. So it's given us a chance to develop multiple avenues for us.
Nice. Yeah, you definitely forced us some creativity, early on for sure.
Yeah.
You're from the area, yeah? You've worked you work in Fish Gaucho prior to.
That's right.
Any other places that you've kind of been in the area?
I've been active in the community or the county for at least 18 years, I believe now, or close to 19. And before we moved over to North County, the business partners before myself, we were at Schooners on the coast, Cayucas, and then we had a restaurant in St. Louis. But all along, operating the pub downtown, which is Pappy's. And then Fish Gaucho came about. So
I've never been to Pappy's in my life. I heard it's kind of a fun scene.
no.
That's kind of shocking. You've been around here for a while.
I'm just joking. Being sarcastic there.
All right, so let's get into the kind of pairing you wanted to work with for this wine.
This wine was fantastic. The both of them, it was hard to make a choice out of the pairing here. The 46 Reserve was just, I believe drinking them in the reverse order might have changed my my choice, but having the 46 Reserve before the second one was definitely, So what I went with was a bold, kind of like a smoky, robust flavoring notes on tri-tip that we wanted to do. Paired it with some pickled peppers, a little bit of a sweet, kind of a tangy finish on a barbecue sauce, buttery roll. The 46 Reserve did really nice with drinking it at first was kind of like a mellow, kind of like an open airy kind of nice flavor. I'm not really big on wines. I'm sorry.
No worries.
But the palate doesn't lie,
Yeah.
While consuming the food, having another drink with it kind of gave another layer of flavoring. But afterwards, after everything was finished with the meal per se, having that final drink gave it a third developed kind of lasting aroma. So the nice robust flavor of the wine kind of jumped out with the pickles and the vibrancy of the vinegar and the heat on that, and it just kind of made it more endowed.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, there's two things that you kind of hit on, and I feel like I really do enjoy with a good kind of bright GSM pairing. One of them is that kind of vibrancy in a little bit of the it'll stand up to acid, it'll stand up to some heat. With the acidity of the wine, it kind of plays well with that. The other is that it's a fun opposite kind of pairing with the meaty tri-tip, meaty smoky, to go with kind of like a bright fruit, kind of caramely sweet components that this wine has. So it's kind of almost reminiscent of the whole concept behind throwing a jellied something on lamb or on a burger or on something like that. This kind of is that jellied component pairing with that. So, I mean, it sounds pretty fantastic to me.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't bring one. There's a little bit of rush there. Like,
understandable. I mean,
stuff I was like behind.
Yeah, we were talking with Liberty last week, and I mean, I've talked, like I said, I've worked restaurant industry stuff, so I've been kind of in touch with everybody. I know that everyone right now is running skeleton crews. It's kind of what you got to do to get by. Trying to keep everybody open and running, so everyone has jobs to go back to when this is all said and done.
Yeah.
We have a question for a chef. Why tri-tip? What is it about? How do you make tri-tip? What do you do with the tri-tip that makes it something that you like to cook with?
It's like a lazy man steak, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So you could have something really nice, like an Angus ribeye steak that you would like lovingly prepare and get set up. Or like leave it on the counter for about a half an hour, and let it rest to room temperature, and like season it and get your pan right. But it's like a hands-on kind of thing from start to finish. Tri-tip, you could really just invest in a good piece of meat, pull it out, let it counter rest, and like get a good rub on it. But then you kind of like get your smoker right and just toss it in, but just pull it at the right time. It's like you check on it later and it's good to go. You maybe flip it once, but doing all the pre-work, such as buying the good meat and doing the good rub, it kind of does it all for you.
Yeah. Speaking about rub, chef was kind enough to tell us what rub he uses. So I know that is that you, Tina. You're going to make this for us tonight. But check it out on our Facebook and Instagram. We'll have that and the recipe to it as well.
Yeah, it was pretty simple. It's like did some olive oil, ground mustard, a couple of other spices and aromatics, and just kind of let it baste in there. But it kind of like it marinates and rests, gets on the surface of the meat, and kind of rolls into that a little bit as it goes.
Nice. Hey, lastly, I know that you've got lots of stuff to do. I know you got orders to go to. Can you give us kind of hours of operation, what you're doing?
Hours of operation. Right now we're doing, like we all mentioned a little bit, adaptive schedule is what we're calling it. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're operating from 11:30 to about 4 o'clock. And then on weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're staying open until 8 o'clock. Doing curbside, a lot of the pre-order pickups. And we're still loving to get the nominations for families in need. We're providing, up to 3 meals for 3 different families a day.
Wow.
And it's something that we could do to give back at this time, or to even give forward. So, but things get, hopefully by May we'll be able to revamp and do a bunch of other things. So.
I can attest. I did not bring a tri-tip sandwich back to the crew when I tried it. They were not happy.
He took it all for himself. This might be why you lose your microphone, producer Brandon.
It's really good. Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Chef Chris.
Sorry, we didn't have virtual tasting, but it's like I was rushing over. I was like, didn't realize how late it was until I started moving out here. So
we get it. But we appreciate you taking the time.
Let's see you guys when you pop in.
Roots on Railroad at the backyard.
Yes.
Check it out for sure. Absolutely. We know that everyone's kind of doing their part to support locally. If you're looking for something tasty, give them a call down there and procure yourself a very tasty dinner.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks, Chef.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's really good.
All right. Well, it's a good time. It's almost lunchtime for us because I got pretty hungry there. That sounds super nice. Pretty excited. For
Absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. So, any thoughts of yourself on the 46 Reserve?
46 reserves. I mean, I really enjoy the 15 vintage there a lot. So much so that when we blended 17, I'm like, Phil, you got to try the 15 before we put it together. I really like that. You should go for that. But it's always one of my favorites. I just like the balance that you have between the Grenache and the Syrah in that blend in particular. I'm a big fan of Grenache. I love the fruit that it brings. I love the acidity that it brings. So putting these together and having that extended barrel aging really kind of rounds up those flavors, really integrates them super well together. And I mean your analogy of blending wines and simmering ingredients together, I think it's really key into those reserve wines.
Agreed. And I can attest, Cyril was definitely, any chance he could get, trying to get a bottle of 1546 Reserve in front of me. It was the inspiration behind the 17. So if you are a fan of the 15, you will definitely be a fan of the 17. They follow very similar kind of, have very similar personalities and follow a very similar, frame of mind and frame on the palate, I guess I could say. So you definitely will not be disappointed in that case. I kind of looking ahead, if you're more in the vein of the 14, 16, 18 will be your year as well. I mean, kind of, we've had these flip back and forth every other year, kind of bigger year, a little more reserved, bigger year, a little more reserved. And so, you can kind of use that. I tend to use that as a rough guideline here in Paso because it tends to work. Those odd years, a little more finessed typically, and the even years have been typically a little bit bigger. It doesn't always pan out that way, but a little something for you if you're digging in the cellar.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 18. So we pretty much put together all the traditional labels lineup right now. Kind of pretty close on what they will be. But I'm looking to an extra, 6-7 months in the barrel from now, getting a little more flavors, a little more characteristic to the wines there. Pretty intrigued on how that's gonna come up. It's gonna be very interesting for sure, especially since it was a little bit of a funky year, maybe so much rain, and a little bit of a cooler year. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. We doing good with questions, Producer Brandon?
Yeah, we're good. Keep going.
Good. All right. Where we at time-wise? Just so I know.
36 in.
Okay. So it was a chaotic start for you. For those of you that tuned in a little bit later, little technical difficulties to start. So I'm still regaining my bearings fully. That really helped. So just to touch back, for those of you that didn't catch the first part of things today, I really want to thank everybody. It's been an amazing experience. You go through these kinds of things, and you learn a whole lot about the community that you're in. And we're in a pretty amazing community. You guys have shown so much support for us. I mean, we've been able to maintain staff as is, which is fantastic and really incredible, seeing how our prime gear of business has been kind of shut down recently. But you guys, everyone stepped up to the plate. People have been ordering our rosé special, case special, which ends tomorrow. The $2.99 for a case. We have blown through over 60% of our entire vintage of rosé. That's incredible to me. With people coming up for curbside, with people just ordering online or calling, that's a lot of rosé that we went through. And so a huge thank you to everyone who's participated in that. If you still want to participate in it, there's another day. Hint, hint.
Shameless plug.
I mean, it's part of what we're doing here. Part of what we're doing. Getting to know everybody, kind of tasting through some of the wines, and talking about what we have going on. That said, we will continue with this programming. Honestly, no matter what happens business-wise, this has been a really fun development. So we will see to it that this happens in some fashion, kind of no matter what moving forward. So keep tuning in. And I know that moving forward shortly, like next week, we'll kind of be building promos around the stuff that we're tasting. We will be very active this week in getting out the wines that we'll be tasting for the next 2 weeks. That said, again, reach out to us. What do you have in your cellar? What would you like to taste? What would you want to go through?
What topics do you want to hear?
What topics you want to see. Send in your questions. We'll pull them here. Cyril had no idea what he was pulling out of the hat. I can attest to that. He wasn't very happy about it, but he obliged and went with it anyways. And it was a really fantastic question. Board games, anything you can kind of do with the time. I know that I've been, catching up on my Disney Plus now that I acquired that recently. And I have no wine and Disney pairings. Sorry.
Is she started watching Frozen already?
We almost dived into that.
When you start this, you're never going to be able to stop. Yeah. Next thing we're going to see you walking in with like queen dress
and singing, belting at the top of my lungs all the songs. I have no shame in my Disney song game. Yeah. All right. So all that said, thank you again. Thanks for all the phone calls throughout the week and emails you sent in and participation for everything. We will hone back in on the wines next week. We're really kicking around the 14 hedge reserve and 14 hedge and the 16 hedge reserve. Sorry,
there might be promos.
Yes, we're working on that aspect of it. And we'll get all that out to everybody via social media. We will have the recipe that Chef Chris from Roots on Railroad already posted up there. Awesome.
Yeah. And then we have a question from Lori. Why the difference in palate between odd and even years? Is it weather pattern related or something intentional?
You know what? It's probably everything's several things in wine. There's a lot of moving variables and targets, but I would say predominantly for what we deal with here, it's vintage. I mean, it's interesting how it works. I mean, vines accumulate effects over multiple years, and so I worked over at Denner, and Anthony over there would always kind of equate to number of years into a drought, because vines, as they're developing in that year, are kind of gauging what's happening, and based on what's happening that year, the amount of fruit that they put out, the amount of growth that they do. A lot of other things shift and change for the following year, because they're actually developing next year's fruit, next year's shoots right now, and so the weather each year affects that year and the following year. So you get a cumulative effect that way. But we here with the winemaking and with a lot of what we do, we're targeting. We want the vintage to shine through. It's not about trying to create an identical product. It's about creating a product that you can put in your glass and recognize that, wow, this smells like a 46. But that 46 is going to be different than the previous year and the year before. And some of that will be some winemaking choices, but really the big driving force is the vineyard. I mean, we do most of our work out there. We spend most of our time out there. If we're doing everything right in the vineyard, we're doing very little in the cellar. It's just kind of guiding fruit through and kind of allowing for what the vintage, delivers.
Yeah, and stress accumulates into the vines as well. Like you were mentioning the droughts. This year we're already looking at 12 inches of rain. If we get a very warm summertime, it will be reflecting on the next year's vintage as well. So that'd be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, it's super interesting. I think that keeps it very, very interactive with us to play with each vintages as their own. Because again, it's that interesting to be able to compare 3-4 years of wines there. I know we've been doing a bunch of the vertical tasting during the winter month there, where we kind of reflect on 3 to 6 different vintages, and really each one of them, even though it's the same varietals or this pretty close to the same blend, really showcases something slightly different and that vintage in particular. So it's always fun.
Yeah, and I think you also get you get what Mother Nature provides in not just the weather for that vintage, but you have events that happen that might cause you to lose some Grenache or lose some Syrah, and that reflects in the final blends for that vintage and kind of shifts you in a little bit different direction. And so, I mean, Terry, early on, you use the phrase, you're always aiming at a moving target, and it's very true. You have wines. You have your dream wines that you favorites that you think of, and that you're always trying to get to and reach to.
Right.
And it's safe to even try to imitate it because you could never imitate it. It'll never be, you don't recreate anything. Every bottle, every wine, each vintage is a one-off. It won't come back. It won't be around again, which is what makes wine so much fun.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, I think, do we have any more questions or
No,
anything
questions
else?
are good.
You don't want to answer one more question from the jar, man?
Do I want to answer one more question? Okay, we got a bonus question for today. Let's see what I got this time around. Seems like the bucket is only dedicated to me today, so
we'll see.
We'll find out. Never mind, it's a question for Phil. I got the only one that is not for me today. So what did you get?
If you could travel anywhere to go taste, where would you go? This is anywhere in the world.
By the way, listen up closely because we'll use this as the gift card question. Go.
Okay, producer Brandon. Man, I'm of two hearts. One is very much, Shadow Nifta Pop, and the other is a very, very distinct and different, Champagne. And it would be a really tough decision for me to go between those two, but I absolutely positively love Champagne and a lot of the things that you can do with it and just enjoying it on its own. And it's such a unique kind of process and environment. But then again, I've worked here. I just can't get sick of Rhone wines and Shadow Nifta Pop. Would be. I haven't been there yet. Plan is to try to get out there, maybe for a river cruise in the future. Throwing that out there.
Team bonding, building experience.
Yeah, we'll be kicking around the idea of a river cruise.
I'll tell you what, it's super cool because guess what? The Hospice du Rhône, the event that's happening every other year here in Paso at the end of May, is also happening every other year in France. So guess what? We could always tie in a professional business trip, somehow find a city right in between Champagne and Châteauneuf-du-Pape because, France being so small, you can drive for a day in either or. And that could be a very easy box to check there for you.
Easy box to check.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know how much driving I should be doing to make it out there, to be honest with you.
So, little note, fun fact here. The favorite thing that our winemaker likes to do is taking champagne and pairing it.
Oh, popcorn.
Popcorn.
I love popcorn. My wife can attest to it. Man, and I was talking with. We're digressing. Sorry. I was talking with some sommeliers from New York who flew out to visit in a event here in Paso, and one of them also big Champagne fan, and was telling me about the Champagne bar just down the block from where she's at that offers champagne and popcorn pairings. And so, come on, Paso. Come on. This is something that we can have.
I know we're a Rhone house. Maybe a pop-up popcorn champagne? Who knows?
Cool.
Right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, again. It's been an absolute treat. Tune in next week at noon again. Follow up on Facebook and on Instagram for recipes, specials, everything that we're running. Let's stay connected. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Be sure to ask any questions you want. DM us, email us. Next week, we got the 14 estate hedge and the 16 hedge reserve. Be on the lookout for some really cool promos that we do that as well. And thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone. And wish you a great Saturday and a happy Easter for whoever is celebrating on Sunday.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thank you.